bring the mic up a little bit.
That's it?
Great, are we all set? Okay.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled to be here at this community forum to introduce you to Dr. Ian Kelly. Dr. Kelly is the current interim superintendent at the Dedham Public Schools. You've been interim since 2002, and previously he was assistant superintendent at Dedham since, sorry, not 2002, 2022.
I was like, wow, that's a long
No.
interim period.
2000, I realized when I was 2022, and before he was assistant superintendent prior to that since 2016. He has also served as principal, assistant principal, and teacher. So he's held all those roles. I'll let you get into a little bit more, but Dr. Kelly earned a master's degree from Cambridge College and a doctorate in education from BC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to introduce yourself and give a few words, and then we can jump into the questions.
Okay, happy to. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate it. I was wondering if I would have an audience.
Yeah,
This is
we
great.
were all wondering.
Yeah. So just a little bit more about myself professionally, and I won't go through my resume again. But what I really have been trying to help people understand as we've gone through the day today is
If you want to start that over again, that'd be great. Sorry, thank you.
Again,
So I won't-
Dr. Kelly.
So I won't go back through my resume. I've been in the field for I think 22 years now, and I've had lots of roles. But what I've really been trying to make sure everybody understands here today is, I love my work a whole lot, and I'm really passionate about it. So I really have been trying to make that clear, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But also making clear.
It's Harley.
Oh, it's not me. Okay, I was like, what am I doing wrong? But also helping everyone understand why Westwood and why for me now. Starting with my love of this work that I get to do all the time. I pride myself. I'm a builder at heart. Like, I build furniture, I build swings, I build things for my family, and I get to come to work every day and build. In our school systems, I get to build relationships, I get to build community, I get to build systems and structures, and all things that support our educators and our students in achieving at really high levels. So it really speaks to who I am as just a person. I love figuring things out and learning how things work, and then how I can make them better or support them. I also really love I know I love my work because the decision to potentially leave Dedham has been a really hard one for me. So I think anytime you feel like it's a hard thing to move on from something, you really must love it and enjoy it a lot. But also the prospect of getting to build all that again in a new community is also like super exciting. So there's that piece of just, I want it to be clear to the community how much I really love my work and enjoy doing the things that I do for our educators and for our students. The Westwood, and why am I here today? That's part of, it's just been part of my journey. So I like I said, I won't go back through the resume, but as I was moving through the early part of my career, I wound up in Natick as a principal at the Bennett Hemingway School. But as I was going through that search process, I was also a finalist for the Sheehan School at that time. And I ultimately went because I was an assistant principal in a school of 750 students. So that larger Benham at that time was, approaching 600. So I was really looking into, but I've always had an interest in Westwood going back to 2008. And I relocated to Dedham in the not so distant past. So I spent a lot of time in Westwood, shopping, grocery shopping, eating, just at the gym, spending time. So I'm pretty familiar with some of the community, not a ton. But this opportunity came up in January. So I had transitioned to interim superintendent in Dedham. And really, I had expected at that time to just fall back to my role as assistant superintendent in July. The deal, what had transpired in Dedham was, the interim was going to be the interim and not be allowed to apply for the superintendency. So I had made the decision, I think the best thing I can do for the Dedham Public Schools is just hold the ship steady from January till July, I thought to myself, putting an interim in there and then having a superintendent after that, it felt really disruptive. And we have brought on 2 new assistant superintendents this year as well. So there's just been a ton of transition. So I thought, let me provide stability. And then I started the work in January. And I have loved it more than I ever thought I would. And I'm having a blast and just enjoying, being able to support our educators and our students in a different way. So the posting came up in January, and I started to learn and just dig in and read as much as I could. I watched a ton of school committee meetings and just read as much as I could. And what became very clear to me was the fact that the kids in this community are like front and center. They are at the center of everything. So when you look at the strategic plans or the school improvement plans or the curriculum reviews, whatever it is, kids are at the center. But beyond the kids, the district is thinking very clearly about the supports for their educators, systems of support and training for their educators, but also the infrastructure. So looking at the facilities and the budget and how these all come together to support learning. And for me as a leader, I have used the example throughout the day, like I lead up from the bottom. I sit at the bottom. In some ways I'm the least important person. And our educators and our students, they are the most important. So, as a leader who leads up, seeing a district that also appears to lead up and focus on what's most important, which are those kids, I felt like it would be a good match. So I applied. And I got to come here today, which I was very excited to do. And really, I've seen throughout the day and just being in the classrooms and talking to leaders and educators and folks around the district that what is on paper and what you can see at the school committee meetings is real. That's happening in these schools. So it's been a journey, but I'm really excited to be here, and I'm very excited about Westwood, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Great. All right, who's first? Seriously, someone's gotta go first.
All right. Yeah, I know. I will be gentle. All right. Hi, Dr. Kelly.
Hi.
Is this okay? Okay. It's nice to meet you. I'm Joanna French, and I have a 3rd grader at Downey. Were you at Downey
I
today?
was, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And then I have an 8th grader at Thurston. And
Nice.
you were
Also
there.
got there today too.
Good,
Yeah.
good. I'm also the co-chair of the Thurston PTO.
Fantastic.
I wanted to ask you, and I've asked this of all the other candidates too, but I wanted to ask you, in your position, do you think that it's the role of a superintendent to set the values for the community or to reflect the values of the community?
I've never been asked that question before in my life. That's a great question. I think it is our responsibility to reflect the values of the community. We serve the community. We are, in almost all instances, we are the single common experience that everyone in the community has, right? So I think the role of the superintendent, getting back directly to your question, is to really engage the community in articulating what those values are, right? And going through a process of, like I said, just engaging and helping the community to understand what are our shared values. Because, we all have different values. That is true. But we also all have fundamental, consistent, and shared values. So, for example, we want our kids to come to a safe space where they can learn and grow and turn into the great people we know they will, right? That's a shared value. So how do we come to a place of understanding what are our shared values and how do those inform and drive our work? And that has always been, when I got to the Benham all those years ago, that was the first goal of my work, was to really get in, learn, understand where the community was and what they needed, but also, as we talked about, where do we hope to be in 5 years? And when we look at those statements about where we hope to be, what values do those statements reflect? What's important to us, right? So academic achievement, community was really important, responsibility, respect. So establishing those core values and then letting those drive all of the work that we do. So I certainly, I think in the role of assistant superintendent, you don't get to take the front seat as you do as a superintendent and driving that work. But I think it's critical as a leader that you work to establish those shared values. You don't impose your values, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Who's next? We're gonna call on each of you. I'm just kidding. We're not.
And there's a quiz?
Hello.
And there's a quiz.
This is sort of a pretty specific question, but, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but My understanding is that several years ago, when sort of the ELA reading curriculum was changed in Dedham, reading specialists were eliminated in favor of more of a coaching model. So that's correct.
That is
right?
accurate,
Okay.
yes.
So that's not the model that we have in
Right.
Westwood.
Yes.
So I was curious, is that more of your philosophy of reading instruction? Was it what Dedham needed at the time? Because I did listen to some of your interview this morning, so I know that there were some concerns with the reading in ELA curriculum. And also sort of a second part of that is you also mentioned this morning the whole science of reading sort of movement,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. And that really is moving towards, bringing back the small group instruction based on like skill deficits, right, and grouping students like that. So if you could just sort of speak to that and what your philosophy of reading education
Sure.
is.
Yeah, and I'll go back and I'll try to unpack all the parts of that question as best I can. So to get to the at that time in Dedham when we restructured, it was a need. It doesn't reflect a particular philosophy. What my assessment of the situation at the time was, we had the district at the time had done a lot of work around getting the budget situated, getting our facilities. We had rebuilt a lot of schools in the years preceding my arrival, and that the curriculum and instruction side of the world really had not had a lot of attention and focus. So when I got there, my understanding from the school committee and the superintendent was like, the elementary curriculum landscape is really, it really needs attention. And I don't think it is an accident that I was an elementary educator and principal by training, that I landed in Dedham. So, at the time, what I really set about quickly, because we had this dueling concern, right? We knew that, or let me reframe that. We were concerned that children were not getting access to basic early literacy skills, which is that's just that can't happen, right? That is setting up kids for so many struggles way down the line. So we knew we had to act and we had to move quickly. We knew that, as I got, well, again, I'll reframe that. I learned that I went around the district and I met with all of our elementary educators repeatedly across the course of the year at all of our schools. I spent a lot of time talking to them, and really this was hey, what is the curriculum? And what resources do you have? And what support do you have? And what I learned, if I would love to go back and find the presentations that I gave to the school committee, I learned we have like 55 different reading curricula going on across our 4 elementary schools. And we have teachers who are, they are working, 180%. They're giving 180%, and we're getting like 70% on the results. Not because they are not great and competent people, but because the systems by design are set up for them to work really hard and struggle while they work. So, we very quick, once I did all of that learning and we presented that and we kind of had a common understanding of what we needed to do, we very quickly started to implement curriculum. So we implemented the units of study and we implemented Foundations, which is a phonics and phonemic awareness program, right away. And we also knew at that time that to do that work, our teachers were going to need a ton of support and not just like one-shot training. They were going to need sustained professional development and support over time. So the reconfiguration of staff, the intent was to provide that support. So we shifted to that instructional coaching model because we knew at the time there was so much work ahead in terms of providing support. When I talked to our veteran educators at that time, they could not, the last time they could articulate having robust professional development around literacy instruction was at the turn of the century. It's 15 years back. So these were critical needs. So they were structural in nature, right? And they were right for Dedham at that time. And I'm so glad you brought it up because at some point today, in one of the conversations I was having, one of the things that it just, it's painful, right? We stood up so much good programming in the years leading up to the 2019-2020 school year, and then it just got like knocked over, like totally knocked over. And it was like it wasn't in its infancy. It was kind of like a toddler. We were getting there, and we were starting to see good results for students and for our teachers. But it just got derailed completely. So, fast forward, we get through all of the trauma that was COVID. And we get back and we're trying to stand it back up and get it off of life support. And what we're learning is like, we're just in a totally different place. So like the model that we designed, and this is what I've been hearing this from our educators as I've been getting around to the schools to just talk with groups of faculty, like we're just not where we were back in 2016 and 17. So we really got to take a different look at what we're doing and how we're providing support. So that process is getting underway. We are super fortunate. I have an amazing humanities curriculum coordinator who has just stepped right in as my interim assistant superintendent. And she's really just taken the lead on starting to really evaluate our programs and get these processes in place to look at how are we going to reshape for the future, because we need to retool a little bit.
I have a question. We actually didn't get to this morning, so I'm going to take this opportunity to ask it now.
Okay.
So, what?
Oh, here, sorry.
Okay. So we feel in Westwood that we have a very good school system. You know, it's the reason people mostly move here. And we're very proud of that. And so I guess the question for you would be, what is it about Westwood that through your research you think has made it so good? And how would you propose to take it from good to great? Turn that back.
Thank you. Well, as I was getting at, I'll kind of go back to a little bit of what I was talking about before. It's part of what I think makes the district great, having.
Now you can answer. 'Cause
I
you've
can,
been-
well, right, and I've seen it in action. There is clearly like super methodical and intentional planning on the part of the district and the town to support the schools. I mean, it is so clear. Hello. It's crystal clear, right? So I think that's a big part of it, is just the intentional and methodical nature of the work that goes on. So when I was at my first interview, when I had asked about that at the end, it was really awesome to hear the educators and the leaders really, affirming that, yeah, like we are super conscientious, and it's very much reflected. And then again today, as I said, being in the classrooms and in the schools, it's alive. Like you can see that. So it's actually, sometimes you look at things on paper and they're not actually taking place, or they are in some way, shape, or form, but that is absolutely what's happening across the schools that I was able to visit in the classrooms. In terms of, my work here, the job is to get here and do everything I can to learn as much about the district, what's happening, the history, and help that inform, like, what are the needs and how do I plug in and support and enhance the work of a high-performing district? I mean, I think that's really, from where I sit, it doesn't, again, and maybe there are, I don't know, but, it doesn't appear as though there are any raging fires that need immediate attention. And again, this is all based on what I've read and what I've seen today and what I've heard. But, I really see it as enhancing the work and just plugging in. And I think that really is a function of doing a really good job of listening and learning and really, like I said, understanding the history and then where it is that the community would like to see their schools going in the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. Any other questions?
We'll pass it that way.
Following up on Joanna's initial question about values, even with alignment of values and acknowledging that you say the job is to reflect the values of the community, even with alignment in values, disagreement can happen, right? Can you talk about a time when you made a decision and ended up changing your mind based on feedback or follow-up discussion that led to you seeing a different point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer broadly and specifically. I mean, that happens all the time. We make the best decisions that we can, and ultimately, the goal is to, we want to land at point B, but we have to accept the idea that we're going to land somewhere to 5 or 10 degrees to the left or right of point B, because we need to listen to people along the way as we conduct our work and as we execute whatever decision that is. So I think, in terms of, when there's just, you can't educate nearly 3,000 children and not have disagreements within the community. That just, it happens. It's normal. It's natural. And I think my approach has always been to embrace it and to really hear and listen and tell me about your concerns. Why is the choice that we made upsetting? And you learn so much about how you can shift and adjust your practice to better accommodate or better meet the needs of the community. So, I'm dealing with a specific example right now, but it just is not. We need to replace our turf field at the high school, and it needs to be replaced. It's not safe for use in sports, but we always hold our graduation there. So right now we're trying to get the project lined up to start as soon as we can because we don't want to disrupt the fall sports season. That has all kinds of implications for the school, for students, for the community. What has happened, and literally this turned into a thermonuclear thing yesterday. So it certainly is not resolved, but it's a place where I'm going to have to dig in and really learn about what happened, because what became communicated somehow was that we were shutting the field down on May 15th and the graduation was being moved for certain, and this was happening. And I'm like, the bid for the contract isn't even out yet. How? So I'm going to have to really unpack what happened there and how did it get communicated that the field was being closed? How did that get so far ahead of the process and where we actually are? And then what do we need to do differently? Because it has already caused so much upset unnecessarily. It just we don't know when we're starting because we don't have a contract or a contractor yet. So that's one example of just where we're going to have to dig in. But really, whenever there is a disagreement or a dispute or a mistake, we just have to dig in and learn and listen to the people who are upset. Because ultimately, again, if you can really put aside your own stuff and understand they're not upset with you, or maybe they are, but let's put that aside, right? It's not about you. It's about they have feelings, they have an opinion, they have an idea perhaps. And I think that has always been when I talk about we want to land 5 or 10 degrees from where we are, they have ideas that can shape our work and help us do better for the community. So that the approach is just to really engage people, bring them in, hear them, and build relationships. I'm trying to think of another example. We have certainly had our fair share of disputes about what's happening with the curriculum and misinformation about what our educators are doing in the classrooms. And we have always, as I kind of described earlier, we were moving very quickly in the early stages of my tenure there because we had to get these things online for kids. And that, and as we then moved into COVID and our curriculum became very known in the household in ways that it never was before, people started to ask a lot of questions. And this obviously was well-timed with political turmoil and all the things that were going on. But, those all turned into amazing opportunities for us to think about hey, just how transparent are we? What are the processes by which we articulate our curriculum? One of the awesome outcomes from that whole, it was painful, it was hard, but good things happened. One of them being we took an opportunity to restructure and look at all of the school committee's policies about curriculum adoption and how that happens. And part of what we built into there was a district curriculum advisory. So I really wanted to make sure that we had a district level group of educators and families who were really coming to understand more deeply how does this work? Who makes decisions about curriculum? Who supports curriculum in the district? And how does that get from federal legislation all the way over here to what's happening in the classrooms? What do our educators control? What don't they control, et cetera, and so forth? And that has been really successful. We're in our second year with that right now. But what it's turned into is it's gone from a core group of people who are learning about these things, because we were well, this is great, but only these 15 people are benefiting. So now they're out in the schools. And they're meeting with focus groups of families and trying to understand, what do you need to know more about? What are topics of interest to you? And how can we provide more information that helps you understand what we're doing? So there's a million examples, but I think my approach has always been, we've got to listen and we've got to respond, and we've got to do so thoughtfully and carefully. Sure.
I was going to ask about that exact situation, so now I'm trying to think how to reword my question, because I feel like you've answered part of it, but not all of it. Just wondering if I need time, or if I should maybe I can just launch and you can forgive the need for redundancy.
No worries.
I wrote it out trying to be succinct and understood, but I'm Helen Siskey. I was a former Dedham resident, and then we moved to Westwood in 2020, and after homeschooling, placed our children in the Westwood public schools. It's been an amazing experience because of what we've all talked about tonight, you know, whether it's in the pickup line, an incident at school, a question or concern I've had about curriculum. Every staff member, administrator I speak to, they listen to understand. We engage in thoughtful, respectful, informed dialogue. They always provide me with any information I ask for. There's consistent and constant communication between the district and the teachers and the parents. And I just so deeply appreciate that. And I know now why the parents and the staff in Westwood have such a strong relationship of respect and trust between each other. So before my two questions, I wanted to note the lawsuit, which you've referenced but not stated, right? There was a lawsuit against Dedham Public Schools that was settled out of court in 2022. When the Dedham High School football coach, David Flynn, who had an excellent reputation on and off the field, and a Dedham High School graduate, was fired after he approached the school as a private citizen and father with concerns about transparency and content in his daughter's 7th grade social studies class. The class was called Ancient History and Geography, but was actually teaching civics with politically charged content without a set curriculum, course syllabus, or course learning objectives in place. He was directed to the Dedham Public School website, which listed no further information on the curriculum changes, but still listed Ancient History and Geography as being for 7th grade. You, as the assistant superintendent at that time, were head of curriculum, responsible for overseeing the creation, communication, and implementation of the curriculum in Dedham Public Schools. So I would like you to comment on two things. One, why should we in Westwood consider putting our trust in you to lead our district when you failed to lead with transparency and efficacy as head of curriculum in Dedham at that time? And how can we as parents and staff of Westwood Public Schools trust you to respond in a civilized and productive manner to our concerns? How do we know that we will not suffer repercussions or have our attempts at dialogue devolve such that we find ourselves or our district in legal proceedings?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, you know, just getting directly to the question, trust, you know, and how you build trust. I think what I would say is that the way that trust is built is by responding effectively to those situations, right? So that, yeah, you're absolutely right. Those were missteps, and where the curriculum had shifted and we hadn't communicated that clearly, and where it was not posted or updated on the website, it was a perfect storm. And you're right, that was my responsibility. As I was talking about earlier, like, I learned from that, though, and I think that's where the trust comes from. You have to learn, and you also have to own the issue. I've been very clear in Dedham and with the school committee, like, yeah, that was on me, and I missed an opportunity there. And some of that is just, you know, the pace at which things needed to be moving, and some of that was just learning, right? So I think, you know, again, I would offer that I feel like I have rebuilt a lot of trust, and I have worked very hard to do that, because I feel like you just have to own the issues and own your mistakes and acknowledge them. So building the curriculum advisory, readjusting the policies, making sure, yeah, the website is updated and it's clear now. Whatever we're doing, it's there, it's available. You know, even with, you know, I make sure there's a date. Whenever it's updated, the date it was updated is on that document. So, you know, there certainly was, and again, it was, you know, I am 150%. There was no intent to be opaque, but it appeared as though we were not being transparent because we, you know, for all the reasons, we were moving quickly, we weren't thinking about some of those things, and that was not wise. And looking back on it, I know that now we've learned. So if you go back and look at our school committee meetings, even in the last 2 years, any curriculum change that is being proposed is coming before the committee before anything happens. And I've been very clear with our department heads and directors, like, well, we need to switch the electives. I'm like, time out, hold on. We need to talk about that, and the committee needs an opportunity. We need to present that, and we need a chance for public comment. We need to get feedback. Like, we have got to walk forward hand in hand with the community. So, yeah, that was a really tough learning experience. For me, as the person responsible for the curriculum and for the training, that was hard. But again, I think you have to just accept it and own it. And here, I heard from plenty of angry parents, and rightfully, right? But again, I think there's just, you have to be willing to sit and listen and seek to understand them. And, you know, some of those families who were really upset at that time are on that curriculum advisory, and they're working with us because again, it's just, I don't know. I think I'm giving a simple answer, but I think that's just at the heart of it, right? Just acknowledging a mistake and working and showing that you're going to make efforts to make things better as you proceed moving forward. And as far as the the litigation piece is concerned, I'm going to leave that alone if that is okay. As the assistant superintendent, I was fortunate to not be the superintendent at that time, but that was very difficult, and that did not help our community either. And we are still living the pain of that for certain. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much for going on.
Okay. All right, very good. You're welcome. Sure.
Any other questions? Any questions? Take anything. I have an unrelated question, I'm realizing. Okay.
And maybe this goes off of, you're rebuilding your reading curriculum currently, so that answers part of the question. But I was curious, as a window into how you think as a superintendent of how to improve our schools and academics. Avery Elementary School in Dedham is 723rd in Massachusetts and has a 37% proficiency rate in math and a 32% proficiency rate in reading. Which would be a concerning statistic to any superintendent. So I'm curious to get a window into how you are looking to approach that. I guess you've discussed a little bit the literacy, but perhaps with math and what you're planning on doing, or what you see as the reason why that particular elementary school is struggling. I know they had a state-of-the-art building built right around the time we moved to Dedham, I think. It was around
Early 2000s.
Yeah. So anyways, I'd love to hear you speak on that.
Yeah, so absolutely. So, you're absolutely, yes, quite concerning when you look at that data. So when you're seeing achievement at that level, that is to some degree, it's a little bit further beyond just like the math curriculum and what's happening, with the reading or whatever that is. There are structural issues at play, right? So do we have appropriate staffing to support a population of students who is pushing 70% high needs, right? So are we allocating resources to support equity and access to the program? So looking at, we have slowly over time repurposed, some of our schools have one interventionist, Avery has 4, so pushing more people to support students in learning there. Making sure that there's good coordination with, like I said, the curriculum, and making sure that our teachers have time to work together in planning and thinking about how do we differentiate for this particular group of children who are very needy, and we've got to support them. I would also add, too, that, most recently, one of the things that we have been tackling is we need to make sure that those children have access to more time on learning and additional time, because we're packing everything we can in during the school day. So one of the efforts we're making right now is to bring all of our before and after school care programming in-house. We currently contract it out, and we're bringing that in, and we're bringing that in-house first at Avery and at one of our other schools, because we need to extend the school day and to provide first of all, we need to provide more access to childcare for the families at Avery School. And right now, the enrollment is the lowest there in our aftercare program, and somebody was pointing that out to me as a reason not to do it. I was like, well, hold on a second. Like, it's the lowest because probably there are the most barriers socioeconomically to get to the childcare that people need. So we need to bring it in-house so that we can eliminate that barrier and get those kids care. But secondarily, by bringing it in-house, we get to control what happens during that time. We can coordinate with the site directors what's happening during homework help. Are they just doing homework? Or are we taking a paraprofessional and moving their workday from 8 to 3 to 9 to 4 and having direct support for teaching and learning for that child who needs additional support? So we've got to be really creative. And I think, in terms of, from where I sit as superintendent, like, I've got to make sure that we're thinking about systems and structures, and that we're being as creative as we can about providing for those students who need more. But then obviously, right, there are issues around curriculum. And I was over at Avery sometime in the last 2 weeks, I can't remember when, but I was meeting with the faculty after school to just, how's it going? Like, where are things? And that is, they are loud and clear. Like, not only do we need more help, But we need to look differently at how does this particular piece of curriculum fit the needs of our students. So they're really, and which I appreciate. Like I think it's just helpful to hear their perspective. So again, engaging with the staff and thinking about, okay, they know best what it is that we can do differently to support their work with those students. So I think there's a lot, but I think it's when you have performance that's at that level, you've really got to, like I said, go beyond just like, is the math curriculum the one that we need? Like, you've got to get really broad with the systems and structures that are in place to support that community.
It sounds like you've done a lot of community building across your entire community, including parents. When I think about our teachers, I've talked a lot with teachers recently, and they've really had a tough run through the pandemic. It's been a tough go. We also had a pretty contentious teacher collective bargaining agreement process, which luckily settled. But I wanted to know, when I think about, when I've talked with teachers, I feel like there's a lot of optimism in looking forward to what's to come, both with having a settled contract, but then also with new leadership coming in place and what the next 3 to 5 years look like. Can you talk a little bit about what your ideas would be to help build community and support morale among our teacher community as you would come into place as a new leader? Mm-hmm. I really liked what you said about leading from the bottom, leading from the bottom up instead of from the top down, and talk a little bit about how you would see that happening with their teacher community.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that starts with, making yourself available and being out in the schools. And again, as I was talking earlier with some of the educators, there's the being visible that is walking around the building and waving, and there's being present, which is quite different. And, getting into the classrooms and talking with kids and talking with the teachers about, again, how's it going? How are you? What do you need? And where are things for you as an educator in the district? So I think, there's that kind of on the ground, just being constantly, as best you can when, you have a whole lot of other responsibilities. But I also think, there is the putting in place structures like, trying to get to the buildings and meeting with the faculty, just, in a voluntary, like, tell them, again, how are things going? Let's have a conversation. Where are we? What do you need? Surveying, we've surveyed teachers over the years. So again, not everybody can hang around for an after-school voluntary faculty meeting, so let's make sure we're surveying our educators and asking them what they need. I also think you have to listen, and you have to model that, because you also need to be able to listen through your district leaders. They need to be listening. If you're going to lead this way, you have got to know that obviously your educators are listening to your students, and are the principals listening to their educators, and so forth, because you've got to really lean on your leadership team to ensure that they have a really close understanding of the needs. But again, building that kind of culture and climate of collaboration and support, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and it just has to be kind of, it has to be pervasive and clear that it's who you are. And, and in all instances, and that if there's an emergency and I met with a teacher and a paraprofessional just in the last week, there was a really tough situation at a school, and I just sat down with them and I said, hey, that sounded like it was terrible, but I want you to know that I know about that, because I'm not managing it, the principal is, but I want you to know that I know. I want you to know that the principal has made me aware, and I want you to know that we're supporting you and that we care a lot about you. Is there anything I can do to help? So I just think you have to be systematic about it in terms of planning structures, but you also have to just be responding to acute situations and on the ground and asking in any way that you can. Sure.
Any other questions? Anything for Dr. Kelly while we have him? No? Okay. I'd like to thank you very much for coming. I know it's been a long day and it's a Friday, and we're all I'm sure you're tired, but we really appreciate meeting you and hearing from you and learning from you. And just like on behalf of the school committee, I'd like to thank you for coming in.
Sure, thank you.
And,
it's my honor. It's been a pleasure. I've had a wonderful time today. Yeah.
And thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate your engagement, of course. And there is feedback forms. So everyone should have received the link. If you haven't, let us know, and we can just text it to you right now. And if you get a chance, please fill that out. We're hoping to have those by Sunday at noon. The school committee will be meeting Monday, 9 a.m. virtually on Zoom, because 2 of us are out of town. So that will be the deliberation and hopefully the vote. So tune in, I would say. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Westwood Media Center. And Gray, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.